Hey, Wood fam, this is Leo with One Happy Widow. You're just going to have to excuse the mess behind me. We're still trying to get cleaned up, and so it's all a work in progress. I thought that I was going to get all this stuff done this summer, and this will be the last video that I post before going back to my new job, going back to work. So today's Saturday, and I start my new job on Wednesday. Can't say I'm really looking forward to it, but you know what? Sometimes we just do what we got to do. So we're still trying to get the basement cleaned up before I can really do a whole lot of anything else, which means I did not get my weight loss course done. Still working on it. Did not get the community done. Still working on it. But, like I said, we have to just kind of forgive ourselves and set new goals when we don't reach the goals in the time period that we like, and just give ourselves some grace, and not try to punish ourselves and just keep on moving on. But today, what we're going to talk about is we had a topic that was talked about pretty frequently this week, and it is about not being able to sleep. So it's the connection between grief and insomnia. So we had a lot of people that were suffering from it, probably all the time, but it came up as a topic this week. And some people were up in the middle of the night and they were saying, hey, I can't sleep. Anybody else? And everybody else is at 3 a.m. saying, yep, me too, me too, me too. And it became a pretty hot topic this week. So I figured I would do a little bit of research and I would talk about that topic, about the connection between grief and sleep disturbances. And that's what we'll talk about this week. Marianne says, hi, everyone. I can so relate to this topic. I haven't had great sleep since my husband passed. Barbara says, hello, everyone. So feel free to post where you are, where you're from, and we'll go through the topics like we usually do on our lives. And then if I don't catch your chat or response, then I'll be sure to catch it at the end. So I'll go through the topics. And then before we close, I will read whatever, comments that I can get to and answer any questions that might come up. So I will go ahead and start by saying I have suffered from insomnia in the past, but not grief related insomnia. I had a bout of insomnia when I was in college. So the only reason why I say that is because I can relate to the frustrations of having insomnia. So I know how that can affect you mentally and physically. But I don't suffer from it related to grief. So it was something that I had to do a little bit of reading up on and do a little research and read some things that other people have experienced so that I could get a little more educated on it and be able to speak on it. When I was in college and suffering through it, I think it was just, the stress of being in college. I was living in a dorm with some roommates I didn't really care for too much. And it's just stressful being in college. When you look back, you're like, man, that was the best time of my life. But at the time, you think, you're so stressed out. And I can remember it was kind of like a cycle because I knew that I would have trouble falling asleep at night, but I was tired all day because I had not been able to fall asleep. And so I'd only get a little bit of sleep. I'd finally maybe fall asleep at 4 or 5 in the morning. And then I'd have to wake up and go to class. And all day I would think, oh my gosh, if I could lay down right now, like if I could lay down right this instant, I would fall asleep in 5 seconds. I'd be so tired. Then when nighttime came and it was time to go to sleep, I couldn't sleep. And I would start to get anxiety about the fact that I knew I wasn't going to be able to sleep that night, which caused me to not be able to fall asleep. So I know how that cycle can affect you. With me, there's two different types of sleep disturbances that are mostly related to grief. One of them we'll talk about today, and that's the insomnia, and it comes in 3 different forms. It could be you can't fall asleep. It could be you fall asleep, but then you wake up and then you can't fall back asleep. And overall, the third is just kind of a general, like you spend more time in bed awake than you do asleep. So wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep. So maybe you can't stay asleep. Or when you wake up, you can't fall back asleep. So all of those are considered insomnia. The other end of the spectrum of sleep disturbance that I probably suffer from a little more is sleeping too much. And that is, not wanting to wake up, wanting to sleep away your problems, like not face, your feelings and things like that, and wanting to just sleep to escape, your grief. We're not really going to talk about that type of sleep disturbance today because I want to really focus on the insomnia part because that seems to be the one that was um, the most common that we saw this week. All right. I forgot to turn my little light on, and so I don't really want to leave the screen and turn it on, but sorry, it's a little bit dark in here. Let me see. Maybe I got another little light. It might be too bright. Is that okay, that's a little better. It's a little better. So let's see if we have a few comments. Oh, Stormy's with us, my main man, Stormy. Hello, Wood fam. It's my sister, Stormy. Tammy says, hi there. Finally made it back to a live stream. Yay, good topic and one I struggle with. Karen Rice says, hello from Louisiana. Allison says, hi, lovely people. Hi there, joining you from Yorkshire in the UK. Jonice says, hello, Wood fam. Hello from Indiana, Sue says. And she's tired. She's putting a bunch of disease on there, so she must be suffering from it as well. I can't fall asleep. I can't seem to stay asleep. I've been up since 3 a.m. Barbara says, I remember bed being my safe place. Yes. And we're going to hit on those topics too. And Barbara says, I had several interesting dreams since he passed on in 2014. Javelina Annie says, good afternoon, everyone from Arizona, 25 days in, back in bed. Okay, so what we'll talk about first is we'll talk about the link between grief and insomnia, like maybe why it happens or, scientifically what might be the causes of it, and then how it kind of affects each other. And then when we get towards the end, I will talk about a few tips that I can share with you that might help you. There's probably not going to be a cure for it because the reasons why we suffer from insomnia, a lot of those reasons aren't going to go away, or they're not going to go away anytime soon. And so we just have to try our best to try to combat the issue and hope that it improves. We might just have to accept improvement over complete solving of the issue, I guess you could say. So we just have to, have some realistic expectations and just hope that we can work on this. Because just like grief, it's never going to end. Like we're never going to stop grieving, but all we can do is just hope that we can get better at dealing with the grief over time. And so we learn how to manage the grief and work it into our everyday lives and learn how to deal with it or live with it or handle it. Kind of the same way it might be with insomnia, but I'll share some tips and some things, and then we'll see where we can go from there. Many reasons for sleep or lack thereof. This is going to be a great discussion. Yes. So I will say that, according to, the research that I did, also I wanted to say, I've got a couple of links in the top of the chat. So before I forget, we're going to talk a little bit about journaling today because that's one of the things that might help you with your insomnia. And so if you need some blank journal pages, then those are going to be on that link there, onehappywidow.com/journal. You can click there. You can you can print out those blank pages. And if not, just get yourself a blank notebook. But we'll talk about how to use journaling in just a little bit. And then also, this is actually one of the topics that I talk about in depth in my Grief Pivot course. So you can also go there. I've got the link. It's griefpivotcourse.com, and it will take you to the page where you can look at the information. But good sleep hygiene is what they call it. But that's actually one of the 28 lessons in those modules in that Grief Pivot course. So we do a really good deep dive into that. There's a video recording, there's some printable stuff, there's some exercises, some homework, some things like that. So we talk even in more depth in the Grief Pivot course about this topic in specific. So research does say, I've got a lot of notes here, so I'll be looking up and down, but research does say that insomnia or other sleep disturbances is one of the most common complaints of people who are grieving. And so it's a complaint of grievers in general, but it's even bigger complaint of people who've lost their spouse because of some extra things that people who are grieving others don't deal with that we deal with as widows and widowers. And also there is a connection between mental health and sleep. They are closely connected. Here's the big problem when you start suffering from insomnia because of grief. Grief causes insomnia, which means you can't sleep, or you can't stay asleep, which means you're tired. Being tired and lack of sleep and sleep disturbances makes it to where you are less able to handle your grief, which means when your grief is not handled, then your insomnia gets worse, which means your grief gets worse. And so you see how the cycle goes round and round. And so what we have to do is we've got to break the cycle somewhere. So if you think about it logically, we can't break the cycle of grief necessarily because the grief is just there. We can't bring our people back. So the cause of the grief is there, and we're learning how to manage it. And so the way that we break the cycle, okay, where we enter the cycle or this wheel is on the sleep side. If we can improve our sleep patterns, then we can give ourselves a better chance to be able to handle the grief part. And so if we're better handling our grief, then we're more likely to be able to sleep. And so we want to turn the cycle around the other way. So we need to deal with it from the sleep part of it, not necessarily from the grief part of it. Okay, so I've got a lot of details to talk about. Again, there's those 3 types of insomnia. The 2 most common is that you either can't fall asleep, or when you finally do fall asleep, you wake up in the middle of the night and then you can't fall back asleep. And that could be due to bad dreams that you're having of your loved one, or it just could be to just general anxiety. One of the reasons why we have trouble falling asleep, several reasons why we have trouble falling asleep, especially if we're widowed. Number 1, anxiety. Grief affects you mentally, it affects you physically, and just anxiety in general, the thoughts that ruminate in your head about your situation. You might go all day and kind of handle your grief okay. Like you're at work, you're dealing with kids, you're dealing with pets, you're dealing with people, you're kind of busy, you're not really thinking about it all the time because your mind is kind of going and you're focused on other things, living life. But then you lay down, the lights are off and the TV's off and everything's off. And suddenly your brain turns on and you start thinking about your grief, and you start thinking about how much you miss your spouse, and you start thinking about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do about this coming up? And you start maybe worrying about what's coming up in the future. When your brain can't shut down, you can't fall asleep. So that's probably one of the big reasons. Second big reason that is unique to being widowed is that you're used to sleeping a certain way. You're used to sleeping in a certain bed in a certain room with a certain person next to you, however y'all have it set up, and your person's not there anymore. And so there's an empty spot in the bed, and it's glaringly obvious that you're by yourself now. And so missing that person laying next to you, that person who's comforted you, that person that you talk to before bed, that person that you can reach out and just touch and know that they're there. It could be a safety issue, just knowing that if you're a woman, and you just kind of have that feeling of security, knowing that your man is there. If anything happened in the middle of the night or whatever, you'd know that he would be there to protect you. Just, knowing that you can lay down and have that feeling of safety, security, comfort, and those kind of things is not there anymore. And so it's really hard to adjust to that new, different dynamic of sleeping by yourself. And then there's there's a real connection between something that we call complicated grief. Complicated grief is also known as extended grief. It comes from PTSD. So complicated grief is kind of being stuck in acute grief and not being able to move forward out of it. And so it's almost like you get to that angry stage of grief, or that denial stage of grief, where you refuse to believe it's actually happening to you, or you're really mad about it. And so you are refusing to even allow yourself to move forward. People who are in complicated grief like that suffer even more from insomnia than people who are just grieving through the regular process of grieving. All right. So let's see. I think I've covered all that on that page. So I just found some of this research online. It did say that widowed women are twice as likely to take sleep medication to help them sleep than others. So, and I don't know where that research exactly came from, but I think it's mostly because, like I said, when you're a widow and you're a woman, you've lost your safe person, you've lost your comfort. And so it sometimes becomes easy to just take something and help you fall asleep, which could be helpful, but also could be to the point where you become dependent on it and then you can't fall asleep without it. So we sort of have to we have to find that balance of, taking something that helps us and finding other methods of helping us fall asleep, like psychotherapy, mental things, mind shifts, exercises, just things like that. We're going to talk about, we're going to spell a whole bunch of stuff out, a lot of options for you that are available. So we'll talk about that towards the end. Again, widowed people in complicated grief suffer even more from insomnia. And a lot of things happen physically when you're not sleeping well, not just for grief, but like physically, there are bad things happen physically to us, mentally to us, when we can't sleep, when we're constantly sleep deprived. And so I know it's just one of those cycles that's so hard to get out of, because you're thinking, well, the reason why I'm suffering from these things is because I'm so damn tired all the time and I can't sleep. But it's not like you can just force yourself. You can't just lay there and close your eyes and say, okay, go to sleep right now, go to sleep now. So you get mad because you know that you're not functioning as well as you could because you're not well rested, but yet you can't get rested because you can't force yourself to go to sleep. So believe it or not, teaching ourselves how to sleep better is something that we have to do. We have to train ourselves. Like, you got to do the work, just like going through the grieving process. You can't just sit around and think that you're going to get better. You have to do the work. You have to do the things. Like if you're going to therapy, I talked about this before. If you're going to a therapist, your therapist is not going to fix your problems. Your doctor is not going to fix your problems, but your therapist is going to give you exercises and things to do and ways to think and things to train your brain to think differently so that you can help yourself. So nobody's going to cure you. You have to fix yourself. You have to cure yourself. You have to help yourself, whatever words that you decide to do, but you got to do the work because you're the one that has to, deal with whatever issues that you're dealing with. So that's what we're going to talk about too today is how can we change this issue that we have? How can we, I wish it was a quick fix. Like, I think that's why a lot of people turn to taking things to help them sleep, because it's like, well, I'll just take this pill and I'll just get drowsy and go to sleep. Okay. Well, that sounds great and wonderful until you think about what side effects might come along with taking those medicines. And I am not judging at all, because I have taken medicines to help me sleep, and I have taken supplements to help me sleep, and I have been there, and I've given them to my children to help them sleep. And so, I'm not immune to this either, but we just have to, we need to talk about the pros and the cons of it, just so that you can make an educated, informed decision for yourself. All right. So here's some things that we want to talk about in the cycle. All right. So you're in this grief, like you're in this journey, in this process of grief. One of the things that happens to a lot of people who are grieving is they don't eat right. So they either overeat. That would be me. When I get really stressed, I overeat. When I get depressed, I don't eat. So I kind of go back and forth. If I'm really stressed out, I'm like eating a lot and I'm trying to comfort myself with food. If I'm getting depressed and sad, I don't want to eat and I want to sleep a lot. So those are kind of like my two ends of the spectrum. But people who are grieving, they don't eat. Sometimes they don't eat right. And so this makes you not feel well. It also messes up your sleep patterns. Okay. So, because if you're not eating right, then you're not getting the nutrition that you need and you're not getting the proper nutrients, and then your body is not functioning properly. And so it also could mean that if you're overeating, then you're talking about, you might have diabetes problems, or you might have high blood pressure problems. You might have cholesterol problems. You might have heart problems. You might have sleep apnea problems. So you see how it all kind of goes hand in hand. All right. People who are grieving may not be exercising like they should, not moving your body. If you are not active in the day physically, it's harder for your body to be tired at night. So I noticed that shortly after Dewey died, I had this phase where I was freaking out because I was thinking, oh my God, I have 4 children at home. One parent is already gone. And so if something happens to me, my kids will be orphans. And so I knew I couldn't keep myself from getting into an accident or something like that. But one thing that I could control was my health, my physical health. And so I thought, well, I'm going to start eating right. I'm going to start exercising. And I really am trying to get back to that. I'm not where I was before, but right after he died, man, I dove into eating right, working out. I was doing CrossFit. I was looking good. I was feeling good physically. And let me tell you what, I did not have a problem sleeping at night because I was waking up early. I was waking up at 4:30 so I could go to the gym 3 times a week before I went to work. And I was exercising, which gave me energy in the day. But oh, by golly, at night, I was tired. I was physically spent by the end of the day. I had no problems falling asleep. So I can attest to the fact that if you are active, and if you've ever, let's say you go outside and you decide to do some gardening for a few hours, gardening is no joke. Like just go out and do some things active that you're not used to doing. You usually, when you get lay down that night, you probably aren't having a lot of problems sleeping that night because you wore yourself out that day. So if you do that on a regular basis, it makes it a little easier because you're tiring yourself out. So exercising in the day is going to help with that, but also that's probably a reason why you might have trouble falling asleep because you're not being active enough in the daytime. Also, when you're not, like I said, you got increased anxiety, you have increased feelings of depression and sadness and these feelings, and your thoughts are going on in your head. And so those again are not allowing when your brain can't rest, your body can't rest. And that happens to me a lot. If I ever do suffer from insomnia now, it's not necessarily grief related, but it's from ADHD related. So number one, I take stimulant medication in the daytime to help me focus. Sometimes it doesn't wear off like it needs to. Medicine in my body hangs around for a long, long time. And so sometimes it's still going at 12 or 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And my mind is like going, 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 going. And I can't turn my brain off. And so it's hard for me to fall asleep sometimes because of that. So I'm suffering the same instance as you guys, but not necessarily from the grief perspective. All right. Then you have trouble falling asleep or you have trouble staying asleep. And then the lack of being able to sleep is causing you some other health issues. All right. So not being able to sleep also causes inflammation in the body. And inflammation in the body leads to health issues and disease. It suppresses your immune system. Your immune system does not work as well when you are tired. So if you're not sleeping, you're more likely to get sick of anything that you can, catch from being around. All right. Also, there could be changes in your work situation. So you may have had to go get a job, or you may have decided to stop working. Anything that changes like that, big changes in your life can lead to disruptions in your sleep patterns. All right. A lot of times when you stop working, like I have loved it to be being at home in the summer and not having to go to work. But I will tell you another reason why I have a little trouble falling asleep at night is because I'm not waking up at 5:30 in the morning. I'm sleeping until I feel like getting up. And so I'm sleeping later and I'm staying up later. So it starts that vampire, problem. So if you're not working or you don't have yourself on a set schedule, you could start staying up later, sleeping later, staying up later, sleeping later, especially if you have insomnia. If you have insomnia and you don't fall asleep till 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock and you don't have to get up for work the next day, if you don't fall asleep till 4, then you might still be tired at 8 or 9 or 10. And then when you sleep in the next day, then you're less likely to be tired that night. So you see how the cycle, kind of the vicious cycle keeps going. You might have a poor financial situation. So since your spouse died, you may have had a lot of changes in your finances. You're probably down a salary. if your husband was working or your wife was working, and when they died, their salary stopped. You might have been fortunate to get some life insurance, or some kind of benefits or some Social Security or something like that, but it's still going to be a big change in your finances. And so that causes worry, causes anxiety, causes you to be able to, thinking about it at night, not able to fall asleep as easily. Of course, then there's loneliness. Just being lonely. Like I said, at night when the lights are off and the house is dark and the house is quiet and there's nothing going on, there's nothing but you and your mind and your thoughts and your grief and your feelings, your emotions. It's just you by yourself. And so that's when it gets really lonely. And that's when everything kind of hits home and you start feeling sad. You start, missing your person, and then you find that you can't fall asleep because you're sad. Your heart is breaking. And how can you go to sleep and rest your mind when you're laying in the bed by yourself and you look over and you know that that was your husband's or your wife's spot and they're not there anymore? Also, you could be suffering from some bad dreams. So our mind works out a lot of our problems when we're sleeping through dreams and thoughts. And it's where we put away our long-term memories. It's where we do some problem solving. It's where we figure things out from the days before. And sometimes our brain figures things out in some weird ways. A lot of guilt comes up. Like if we have guilty feelings, that a lot of those come up in bad dreams or just dreams in general. A lot of times we will dream about our spouse, and sometimes it's unsettling. Sometimes it's comforting. It's almost like we get a little visit from them, but other times it's really unsettling because they'll say things to us that really hurt in our dreams, and then we wake up and even though it didn't really happen, it still affects you emotionally in the same way. So especially like if let's say you decide to move forward and start dating, when I first started seeing JP, I had several dreams that Dewey would come back and be like, well, I'm back. Let's go home. Let me go see the kids and let's go pick up where we left off. And I'm thinking, how do I tell him that I have a husband at the house and he's fixing to come home? Like, this is not an issue that really is going to happen. But in my mind, it was this me working out these guilty feelings of like moving forward, which means leaving my spouse behind and moving forward in love with someone else. And so I was having to work out those emotions and it was coming out in my dreams. So, also we've got some long-term effects of sleep deprivation. So having a couple nights not being able to fall asleep, okay, you're going to be tired. But if this is something that goes on for weeks and weeks or months or longer, you're going to start to suffer some other physical problems as a result of not getting enough rest. Okay. Some of the most common are your skin ages. So if you'll see people who, I've seen some people who've posted pictures of like, this was a picture of me right before my husband died. And then this is a picture of me a year later after they died. And they look like they've aged 10 years. And it's because the grief, the emotions, the lack of sleep, the lack of taking care of yourself, not eating right, not exercising, not sleeping. It's like it just ages you. Stress ages you. If you look at presidents, they say a lot of times presidents age like 2 or 3 times as fast during their presidency because of all the stresses of being the president. So same kind of thing. So it will age you prematurely or faster than normal. Also, you have increased risk of several different things like stroke, obesity, heart disease, cancer, and other premature death. So again, your immune system cannot work properly when you're not rested. Your metabolism cannot work properly when you're not rested. Your mental health suffers when you're not rested. You start not thinking right. Your thought processes are not really logical all the time. We talked about that. We did a whole video one time about widow's fog, widow's brain, about how we forget stuff. Like we can't remember what we were talking about, or we lose our keys all the time, or we, just being forgetful. Part of that is from sleep deprivation. I just watched a movie a couple of weeks ago. I don't even remember what the movie was called. It was kind of a sucky movie, but the whole premise of the movie was that some kind of solar flare happened in the world or whatever, and all the electricity in the world went out. But also as a result, like nobody is able to sleep except for one or two people in the whole world. Everyone else could not sleep. They were tired, but they couldn't sleep because something happened in their brain chemistry and they couldn't fall asleep. And they knew they only had like a week or two to live because you cannot live without sleep. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture. Like when they torture people, sleep deprivation is one of the methods they use because it makes your brain not be able to think correctly. I mean, people who use drugs, people who use stimulant drugs like meth, they stay awake for days at a time, 4 or 5 days at a time, and they start to hallucinate because their brain's not working right because they haven't slept. And so they start seeing things and hearing things and imagining things that aren't really there because their brain is not working correctly because they're not sleeping. It doesn't take but a few days of sleep deprivation for you not to be able to function at your best. All right. And also, one last thing is that long-term effects of sleep deprivation is it decreases your bone density. And as we get older, especially women, but even men, as we get older, we already lose bone density just because of the aging process. And so that, increases falls and broken bones and broken hips. And when we do fall, things break easier and we hurt more and just all these things. Another thing is that when you are grieving, it causes physical pain. Your heart actually hurts. You sometimes have panic attacks where you actually feel like you're having a heart attack, or you feel like you might die, or you feel like you might suffocate. If you've ever had a panic attack, you know what that feels like. And those physical pains also result in us not being able to sleep or rest. So you see how it's like this vicious cycle. We got to figure out where to enter into the cycle to try to start fixing things and making things better. We just have to decide, like, it's like jumping on the merry-go-round. It's going around and around. You got to figure out, where do I jump on, without getting knocked down. All right. And so here are some, and here's a long list I'm going to name. It's about 10 things of daily effects of lack of sleep. And if you have lack of sleep right now and you're suffering from it, you know that these are going to be true. So this is what happens to you in the daytime when you have not been able to sleep very well. You have an increase in frustration, feeling overwhelmed, feeling irritable, feeling angry, feeling hostile, feeling depressed, emotionally reactive, meaning like you overreact to things, from about other people. You feel less friendly. You feel less elated. You feel less empathetic. You feel more negative. You are hungrier, which might lead to overeating. And you have reduced immune response to illness. Do any of those sound familiar to you if you are suffering from lack of sleep or insomnia? So can you see how, number one, if you weren't even going through grief and you were just having insomnia, you see how that can affect you at your job or being around other people. People might not want to be around you if you're like this all the time. Like, you become the angry person. You're frustrated all the time. You have a short temper. Your patience is low. You don't feel sorry for people. It's hard to feel sorry for people when you're grieving, especially when you're grieving your spouse, because somebody was, they talk about, something stupid, something small. And you're like, really? You're going to complain about, your car seat was cold or something when you got in the car, like something dumb. Somebody will complain about something dumb. And you're like, I can't believe they're complaining about that. My husband is dead. Don't they realize? Like, you automatically go there. So you stop feeling sorry for people. So like, you have a short fuse, you have less patience for other people. You might even have less patience for yourself. I can remember my mom used to say, man, I'm so irritable. I can't even stand my own self. And she would say that about me. She's like, I bet you can't even stand to be around your own self because you're so negative all the time, when I was having PMS or whatever. Like, it's hard enough to be around other people, but you might be so irritated that you don't even like your own company. And that's hard because you can't get away from yourself. And so you have to try to figure out a way to like turn all of those thoughts, those negative thoughts around into something positive. And it's hard to do that when number one, you don't feel like it. And number two, you're sleep deprived. And so, your body chemically is just already prone to feeling all these negative feelings and all this bad stuff. And so you can see how, and that's even if you're not grieving. So add grief on top of that whole list of shit that I just listed. So not only are you grieving and you're trying to figure out how to live life from day to day, but now you have this long list of crap that you're dealing with because you're sleep deprived. And so you see how the cycle just kind of keeps going and everything compounds onto everything else on top of all the other crap that you're dealing with that comes along with grief. And we talked about primary grief in a video, and we talked about secondary grief in a video, which is another whole topic in itself, but it compounds everything. And so it's no wonder we're having trouble, because when we're awake, we're struggling. And then when we're trying to sleep, we can't, and we're tired, and we're mad, and we're sad, and we're stressed. So it's like this whole big ball of negative everywhere we look. So we got to figure out, we can't fix it all. So we have to just we have to pick one thing and focus on it and hope that it kind of affects the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Just like we talked about before, you cannot look at the top of the mountain. You cannot look at the 26 miles ahead of you in the marathon. You have to just look at 10 feet in front of you. And you have to just do a little bit at a time to try to fix and hope that everything kind of snowballs in the opposite direction. All right. So the good news about all of this is that if you can't figure out how to treat your grief, or if you're struggling with your grief, if you can focus on treating the insomnia, if you can hit it from the sleep side, then you will be better able to deal with your grief. And when you're better able to deal with your grief, you'll be more likely to be able to sleep. So let's focus on, rather than trying to focus on easing our grief in hopes that it will help us sleep, the faster way would be to try to help us sleep, so that in the process, we can now better deal with our grief. All right. So let's see if we can figure out some ways that might help us to do that. All right. So I'm really done talking about like the effects of insomnia and all the bad stuff that comes along with it. Next, I'm going to talk about what's called sleep hygiene. So we're going to talk about some things that you can do to help yourself to be able to sleep or stay asleep. Like I said, there's not going to be a cure, but we're going to, and sometimes it goes through phases, but we're going to talk about some things that you can try, that you really have to put forth that effort. But before I get to that, I'm going to go back and see if I'm going to read through some comments and see if there's anything that we want to bring up. So, hello from Washington State. Snowy Owl says, Sophie says, hi, my father died, and that first year I slept less and less till I only slept 3 hours. I was 17 every year, including this year. I have issues going to sleep from March to the end of April. It's been 5 years. So Sophie, we were talking about this, the cycle. So it looks like it's a cyclical, it comes around when you have those flashback feelings, and, it just kind of comes around at the same time of the year. And that's common to see that. Marianne says, this is right on the money. My brain seems to go into overdrive when I go to bed. Yeah, and I think it's just because, you're not focused. You don't have anything else to distract you. You don't have work to distract you, or TV or kids or other responsibilities. It's just you and your brain and your thoughts. And it does kind of start flipping on and start thinking about all that stuff. Allison says, from day one, I was able to sleep, which was a gift. I was physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. I still am 20 months in, but the quality of sleep is poor, and tiredness is a constant companion. Some people don't have problems falling asleep or staying asleep. Some people have problems waking up, or they feel tired all the time because even though they're sleeping, they're, like you said, the quality is poor. That's a form of insomnia too, is not being able to stay asleep. Like it's just real light sleep. And so that's a common thing too. Let's see. Suzanne says, hi, Sophie. My daughter was 18 when her father, my husband, died. You are so young. It is such a big loss. Yes, that is true. And we all know grieving kids, they grieve in such a different way than we do. And it's a different type, but not one is not more or worse or easier or harder. Just a totally different type of loss there. Um, Sophie, my daughter was 15, 16 now, and she is the same, having less and less sleep, which is a huge worry for me. I will say, my daughter, my youngest daughter, Dallas, you probably met her last time we had a live session, but she has a lot of trouble sleeping, and I think it's because of her thoughts in her head. And I will just go ahead and let you know that she takes Benadryl sometimes when she has trouble sleeping, because it's a very, very light sedative, and it's something that you can take over the counter, and it just kind of helps her to fall asleep. Sometimes she takes melatonin, but that was something her grandmother would give her. And I still don't know how I feel about melatonin. I've heard bad things and good things. I've heard that it's great. It works when you take it, but then it tells your body that you don't need it. And so you stop producing it, and then you have to take it. I don't know. I can't say one way or the other, but the last thing I want to do is cause my child to have to take melatonin for the rest of her life because I got her on it early. So I'm just in case. I don't know. It's more of an uninformed decision than anything else. Not against it or for it. So just, I don't really know. Let's see. Shelly says hello. And Sophie says, Suzanne and Allison, I used my computer to escape my loss. Then I would fall asleep anywhere, in a car, during meals, etc. I thought I needed to be strong for my mom. I see. So you were basically staying up until your body just took over and just put you to sleep whenever, which, that's kind of like what happens when we ignore our grief and we don't cry and we refuse to face it. It comes up and sneaks up at the times when we least expect it, or when it's not very convenient for us. So it's going to happen. Like, you're going to fall asleep at some point, and you're going to feel that grief, and you're going to cry at some point. And if you don't allow yourself to do it when it's an appropriate time, your body's just going to pick a time whenever it feels like it, and it's going to rear its ugly head, and it's going to come in then. So let's see. My daughter's sleep is improving now, but it took almost 2 years. Hang in there. So yeah, it might be something that just takes a while for you to train yourself to sleep better. And we'll talk about some ways to do that in just a few minutes. Sophie says, I felt like I woke up from a sort of dissociation. Nothing felt real, but as I said, I felt like I needed to be strong. I realized it was a poor way to cope. You know what? Nobody knows how to cope when we're doing it. Like, you can't teach yourself how to do it. Nobody can train you how to do it. You can't practice how to do it. You learn by doing, you learn by living. And so rather than to try to say, oh, this was, I shouldn't have done this, or looking back with regret or anything like that, you just have to look at it as a learning experience. I made so many mistakes with my kids, especially when I was in fresh grief. And I look back now, I'm thinking, that was so dumb. I can't believe I did that, but I didn't know any better. And so I was just learning as you go. There's no way for you to learn how to be a widow or a child, who's lost their parent, until it happens. And then you just learn by doing. So don't be hard on yourself. Just give yourself some grace. And just once you realize that you've done something that might not be helpful for you, figure out a way to change that and do something else that might be more helpful to you. All right. That's all we can do on a day-to-day basis. Sophie and Suzanne, thank you. We had a good chat last week about not hiding our feelings from one another, but we all do it. Sometimes we feel like we need to protect other people, especially our kids. And I did that too. I didn't cry very much in front of them. And now looking back, I realized that they thought that I wasn't very sad about it. And so they thought, wow, mom didn't really care too much about daddy, I guess, because she didn't really cry that much. And then she went out and got a new husband. So, she just, like, they didn't realize what was going on inside, because I hid a lot of it from them, thinking I was protecting them. Instead, I should have been teaching them that it's okay to show your feelings when you feel sad. Let's see. Suzanne says, you are right. I tried to be strong for my daughter, but it just made it worse. I just can't replace her father. We are slowly learning. And that's right. As a parent, our job is to protect our children. And when we lose a spouse, that's the worst pain, that they can take. And that's the one thing that we can't fix for them. We can't take that pain away. We can't bring their dad back or their mom back. And it's one of the most helpless feelings in the world. It's really tough to deal with as a parent. Let's see. In-laws thoughts, Marcia? Oh, you know what? In-law stuff. that is that's a topic. That's a whole nother topic. We're going to touch that one at a different time. Um, my sister-in-law is a widow too, so we can talk to each other. So yes. Carrie says, I also work overnights. Lack of sleep is so bad. I've tried meds with no help. Yeah, sometimes even medicine doesn't work. So Marcia says, I'm on medicine for sleep. And then Carrie says, I have horrible nightmares. So that's probably, sometimes medicine can make the nightmares worse, depending on what you take. And so it might be a trial and error kind of a thing and working with your doctor. Peg says, seems like I need to nap a lot. So, Peg, if you're up at night and you're having insomnia and then you're napping a lot in the daytime, it's because you're tired from your insomnia, but you're probably making that cycle. You're perpetuating that cycle when you sleep in the daytime, because then it's less likely you'll be able to sleep at night. So we're going to talk about that too in all of our sleep hygiene in a little bit. It's hard to fall asleep for me, says Edith. Snowy Owl says, I had the ambiguous grief for years ago, not knowing what we were dealing with. When my wife passed away last summer, my sleep was somewhat regular. And then Annie says, trazodone, 100 milligrams for sleep, up to 50 milligrams can fall asleep, but wake up too early and very groggy. Dewey took trazodone for a little while to try to help him sleep. And I think they gave it to our dogs too, to help him sleep too. I think that's one of those that gives to people and to animals. Anarchy says, Sophie, you are not alone. We are in this together. Big hug from the Netherlands. So we got support from all over the world. Monica says, I get scared living by myself, so going to bed is hard, but once I get to sleep, I seem to be able to stay. I just don't like waking up at night due to a sound or something strange. So yeah, Monica, we were talking about kind of a normal thing when we're by ourselves. You can, at night, you can get freaked out sometimes, and you might hear a noise or something, and you start thinking, oh, what is that noise? What is that going on? And we can freak ourselves out at night because we start getting scared. And so that whole cycle kind of starts. But okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about some things that you can do. These are not easy fixes, guys. Okay, so it's not just going to be like, oh, well, just, turn your TV off and, put a mask on or whatever. Like, these are things that you have to do, and you have to do them regularly. Like, you can't try it once and say, well, I tried that. I tried turning my TV off for an hour before bed and I still couldn't sleep. So that just didn't work. It's more about developing routines and habits so that they start to work over time. So you have to be consistent and you have to keep doing it. If you think about it, moms, if you have kids, you remember when your kids were little and you tried to train them to sleep and you're like, okay, we have this bedtime routine, right? You have this, like, okay, first we take a bath and then we put lotion on and then we snuggle and we have a, drink of water and then we have a story. And then you go through this ritual or this routine for your kids because it starts to signal to them mentally and physically, it's time to start winding down for bed. And you find if you do that with your children on a regular basis, it makes it a lot easier for them to fall asleep. The kids that we did that with on a regular basis fell asleep easier. Well, guess what? It works with us too. It's not just a kid thing. It's a human thing. And so if we do this for ourselves and train ourselves to have this bedtime ritual and these routines, then it will start to signal to our brain, hey, it's time to start winding down. It's time to start thinking about sleep. And so these kind of things will help. But like I said, you got to do them. You got to do them consistently, and you got to wait and give it time to start working, or at least start helping. And like I said, it might not completely ever work. You might always have some degree of insomnia, but we're just trying to find a way to improve. Okay. Any kind of improvement is going to be better. All right. So obviously I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a counselor. So, I can't give you any medical advice. I can say this, that you may be able to get some help from a therapist or a counselor in this area. If you tell them, hey, I'm having trouble sleeping, there are actual cognitive behavioral therapies. There are strategies, that they can do to help you that will, help you in this area. But again, they're going to tell you the same thing. It's not something you can just do one time and say, oh man, that worked so good. Whenever I can't sleep, I just, I just count sheep and it works, right? Like it's still going to be something that you have to do consistently and over time to see if it works. But therapy might be something that you can think about doing. Um, again, we talked about medication. Some people try medication and it works. Some people try medication, it doesn't work. Some people don't want to try medication. Some people do it as needed medication. Some people do an everyday medication. So just know, I don't know, like I can't tell you what medicine is going to work for you because obviously I'm not a doctor. I can just tell you that there are medical options out there that you can talk to your doctor about, that you can discuss if you're open to those kinds of things. Um, I have taken some things before, that helped me sleep, but they weren't specifically for helping me sleep. They were for like a panic attack. Like if I had medicine that I could take as needed for a panic attack, but let me tell you what, it would knock me out. But the panic attack probably also knocked me out. So, medication is an option if that's something that you think would help. But I will tell you this, it's artificial and it might not be something, you got to know that there's going to be side effects. So it just depends on what's most important to you. If sleep is number one and it's what you got to have no matter what else is going on, then you might consider taking medication, but also knowing that there are going to be other side effects. Some medication helps you sleep but causes you to have dreams, like weird dreams. Some medication will help you sleep, but then cause you to sleepwalk or do some things, or, like people who take Ambien, they might wake up 3 days from now and see 10 packages from Amazon on their front steps and not know what happened and realize they were Ambien shopping, like, so there's, you got to figure the pros and cons and make sure that, if you talk to your doctor about taking something, make sure that you're informed about what are the side effects, what are the short-term side effects and long-term side effects. What if you take something and then you can't sleep without it? And then you have to figure out what, is it something you're willing to take for the rest of your life? It might be. And if that's okay with you, that's fine too. It's all about what you need though. Just make sure you make an informed decision. That's all I have to say about that. And then there's going to be supplements or over-the-counter medications. So there might be something you take every once in a while, like Tylenol PM or something like that, or some other kind of sleep aid. Like I said, Benadryl sometimes can help. And then there's other things that I don't want to say the name of it out loud because I don't want it to get flagged on YouTube. But like there's things that are legal in some states and maybe gray area in other states that are supplements that depending on what state you live in, you could get from a vape shop. And in capsule form or liquid gel form or gummy form, that those are something that I have taken. I take every night basically, and it really helps to kind of calm everything down, helps with anxiety, helps with sleep. And so if that's something that you choose to do, then you can just do your own investigating depending on where you live, what country you live in, what state you live in. All right. Now, here's some, besides taking stuff and medical stuff, now we're just going to get down to like behavioral things that you can do, that you can try, that will help. All right. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that your environment is conducive to rest. And so you want lights out. You want a dark room. You want no electronics on. You want a cool room, because when you start getting hot and stuff, it's really hard to fall asleep. Okay. It's better to have your room cool and then cover up with a blanket than to have it too hot and then be sweaty and you can't fall asleep. And you want quiet. Okay. So you want darkness, you want no sound, and you want cool air. As far as quiet goes, you might need like a white noise. So you can actually find apps on your phone that will play like a trickling brook or waves on the ocean or rain, or white noise, kind of like that. Sometimes I use that because I have ringing in my ears. I'm going through some hearing loss and I have ringing that when everything gets quiet, I suddenly hear all the time. And so white noise sometimes helps to drown out that ringing in my ears and helps me sleep. So that's also something that you can investigate. All right. I also sleep with one of those masks. And so, and I mean, it keeps out every single bit of light because it has these little cups that go around your eyes, and it is pitch black. I could have my eyes wide open and not be able to see a darn thing. And so you can find those on Amazon. And they're really good at keeping all the light out. Um, I also sleep with one of these little masks that go around here that like keeps my mouth closed so that I don't snore, so I don't keep my husband awake all night. All right, so electronics. I'm telling you these things that you need to do. I don't do all of them, so I probably have bad sleep hygiene, but I also don't suffer from extreme insomnia. If I were suffering from it a little more, I could do more of these things, but it's kind of like a do as I do, do as I say, not as I do kind of a thing. So, some of these things I don't really follow as well as I should. However, stop electronics at least 1 hour before going to bed. So that means don't be reading your phone until it's all time to go to bed. Don't be watching TV and falling asleep with the TV on, because that blue light signals something in your brain to kind of keep going and it doesn't rest. So even if technically you're falling asleep, you're not falling asleep as deep as you could because your brain is still kind of paying attention to the TV sound or the light that's kind of shining through your eyes. So try to stop your electronics at least an hour before bedtime. All right. Avoid napping. So Peg was talking about napping throughout the day. All that's going to do is start the process over again. So when you're up a lot at night and then you're tired in the afternoon, that's when you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I could just close my eyes and go to sleep right now. Try to resist, because if you take that nap, then when it gets to be nighttime, you're not going to be tired again and you're going to have that process start all over again. So if you can avoid napping, try to stay awake in the daytime so that you can sleep at night. Avoid caffeine and alcohol late at night, because caffeine obviously is a stimulant. Alcohol will also keep you from, some people think if they take a few drinks, it helps them to sleep, but it's not always going to be for the best, because you might sleep, but then you might wake up later on in the nighttime. Also, as far as caffeine, unless you have ADHD like me, and in that case, caffeine actually helps to kind of wind you down. But for a normal person, caffeine is a stimulant and it will make it harder for you to fall asleep at night. We talked about exercise, but we're going to talk about it again. Try to get some exercise in a couple times a week, whether it be walking, brisk walking, like I said, gardening, walking your dog, working out, getting on the treadmill, doing some lifting, some weights, doing just anything that you can think of, but move your body, because you have to expend some of that energy that your body has in you so that you can help yourself get kind of worn out at night. All right. Limit the bedroom to only sleeping. It's called stimulus control. So, in other words, if you're having trouble sleeping and you're spending a lot of time in your room watching TV, doing crafts, reading books, doing crossword puzzles, or whatever, you're doing a lot of stuff in your room, then your body is not getting that signal that room is for sleeping or bed is for sleeping, because bed is for everything else, or in your room, you're like living your life in your room. And so you're not getting that signal that, oh, this is where I sleep. And so just like your dog, your dog has a bed that they go to sleep on. Or if you put your dog in the cage, our dogs, when they are inside, when we want them to go to sleep or we want them to calm down, we put them in the cage. And when they get tired, they go in the cage themselves, because that's like their resting place. And so it's like it's a signal to their body and their brain that this is where I rest. So do the same thing to your room. Make your room to where don't hang out in your room. Hang out in your living room. Hang out in your kitchen. Hang out in your den. Hang out in your office, or, whatever. But don't come to your room until it's time to go to sleep. That way you can start putting that connection to your brain and your body to, this is where I rest. All right. So that's stimulus control. Turn your phone off from notifications. And I know that's not always possible if you have young children or you have people that you don't want to miss a phone call, if you have sick relatives or something. I know it's not always possible, but to the best of your ability, try to turn off those notifications so that you're not, even if you don't fully wake up, if you hear bzz, bzz, go on from texts and advertisements coming through, or if my phone beeps, my phone buzzes when emails come through, so that thing goes all night. That will keep you from sleeping as soundly as you should. Also, we talked about journaling. So get your journal, whatever your journal version is, and just write down your thoughts. Do a brain dump. Okay, because if your brain is ruminating, which means thoughts are going around in your head and you can't stop them, and that's what's keeping you from sleeping, if you will take those thoughts and put them on paper, then it is an actual, like it's an actual brain exercise. The thoughts actually, like in my mind, they exit from my head and get put on paper. To me, it's like, it's also an ADHD thing, but it's a safe thing because I have a panic feeling of I'm going to forget something. I'm going to forget it. It's in my brain and I need to think about it so I don't forget it. But if I can write it down and write, I have notebooks. Look how many notebooks I have. These are my lists. Like this is what is in my brain all the time. So when I'm afraid I'm going to forget something, I pick up my notebook and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write it down. And when I get the thought on the paper, I feel like, okay, I'm safe. Like I won't forget it because it's here. And if I need to if I need to go back and find it, and a lot of times I don't go back and look at it, but like I'm able to just kind of rest. My brain can stop because all the thoughts that were up here trapped in my brain are now living on this paper, which I know that's a permanent thing. So journaling can be the same thing for these emotions that you have. Take all the thoughts and the worries and the things from tomorrow that you're worried about tomorrow or that you should have done yesterday or whatever, and write it down and close the book and put it over here next to you so that guess what? The shit is not going anywhere. So when you wake up tomorrow, when you're ready to start worrying again, pick up the book and look at it if you really want to, or just let it sit there until you have the mental capacity to deal with it. Okay. Because I promise you, it's not going anywhere. And so if you're having those thoughts, those obsessive thoughts that you can't quite let go of, if you'll write it down on paper, then that will hold those thoughts for safekeeping. It's not like you're ignoring them. You can't do anything about it 11 o'clock at night. You can't call anybody and fix anything. You can't pay a bill. You can't solve a problem. You can't do anything for these issues at night. So just put it on hold, put it in that book, and let the book keep it safe until you're able to deal with it and you're awake and you're fully rested tomorrow or some other day. All right. So that's what journaling is for. All right. Again, we talked about some white noise. So if silence is not good for you, try a white noise app or even on YouTube. Go on YouTube and turn on YouTube and they'll have like Babbling Brook or, rain, whatever, sleep, something. You can find something that you like. You could, okay, if sleeping alone is a big issue, okay, the empty side of the bed is really bothering me, then you could change your sleep environment. There's all kinds of things you can do. You can sleep in a different room. You can get a different bed. You can sleep on the couch. You can sleep on their side of the bed. Sometimes sleeping on their side with their pillow and their blanket might help you feel closer to them. Sleep with an article of their clothing, or sleep with their pillow. So it kind of helps you feel closer to them. You could, I think I saw something. Joni says, oh Lord, not the wine. I just looked it up, but I think Joni said something about, or somebody said something about letting their dog sleep with them. So if you have a pet, you could let your animal sleep with you. That could bring a comfort to you. You can have a body pillow, like one of those really long ones that you can just sort of like hug, wrap your arms and your legs around it, and it'll kind of give you that same sort of comforting feeling of like a presence next to you. I know it's not a replacement. We can't get a replacement. And so we're trying to find something that will suffice. And so it's something that's got to be good enough. Right. And I know there's some more comments coming up, so I'll hit those in just a few minutes, but I got a few other things. Make a bedtime ritual. So I talked about that with the children, right? Make your bedtime ritual, even if you have to list it out, and make it be like, if you take a bath at night, take a bath, take a shower, do your moisturizing, like do your skincare routine, brush your teeth, just all these things, take your medicine, but have it to be the same thing in the same order at the same time every night. One of the things that will help you a lot that I never was able to do, but I know it will help, is go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every day, even on the weekends, which I can't do that. But if you can do that, then when it's time for bed, your body will be like, hey, it's time for bed. It's 10 o'clock. Time for bed. It will start telling you that you're tired. But that also means if you're going to bed at 10, you need to be waking up at 5 or 6 even if it's Saturday or Sunday, and that will keep you on that sleep-wake schedule. It's part of your circadian rhythm. It's biological. It will help. It's really hard to do, though. I understand, because I have a hard time with that too. Um, I already said that. Oh, you could do meditation. So at night you could, we do this every night in the form of prayer. We pray every night. And so we just kind of get all of our issues out and we leave it up to God and we let him handle it so that we can sleep. But if you are not into prayer, you could just do meditation, which is some deep breathing and some, I've got some videos on that, teaching you how to do guided meditation and things like that. So just enough to, again, get all those thoughts out of your brain, do a brain dump, do some heavy, some deep breathing, some cleansing breathing, some yoga, some stretching, whatever it is. Just make that part of your routine if that kind of helps to relax your body. And then you could, if you're having a lot of stress, if you're holding a lot of stress and anxiety, like in your body, you could go schedule a massage, go schedule somebody to work all that stuff out and kind of get your muscles relaxed and get all that tension out. And it will help you to relax later on. Maybe even acupuncture. I've never done acupuncture, but I mean, it could be something if that's something that you're open to. So another option. All right. So again, when we talk about this in the Grief Pivot course, we go into a lot more detail about these things, but I'm just doing a quick overview of some things that you could think about that might help you. So again, if you're suffering from insomnia, quick fix will be like take some medicine for that night. But if you're really looking for some long-term improvement, it's going to have to be something that you implement as a routine on a daily basis for a long period of time. And then you're going to see small improvements over time. And eventually, it's just like eating. It's just like, if you want to lose 50 pounds, you can't lose it by next week. You're going to have to do it for a long time. You're going to have to eat right and exercise for a long time. And you're going to see little tiny, tiny improvements and changes. But over time, when you look back, you're going to be like, wow, look how far I've come. So the same thing works with sleep hygiene. Same thing works with, fixing these insomnia things, is that you're going to find that you are maybe able to fall asleep a little sooner. Maybe you're able to sleep a little longer. And then one night you might think, oh my gosh, I slept through the night, just like when your babies are little. And what you remember the first time your baby slept through the night and you're like, yes. And then the next night they didn't do it again. And you're like, crap. It's kind of the same thing. It's a slow process of training yourself to fall asleep and stay asleep. All right. I'm going to go back and see if I missed any comments or if you have any questions. Now's a good time to put them. And then after I get through the comments, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the week. All right. Let's see. I can't sleep with the lights off, Jonice says. I drift off, then about 4 a.m. I take the light out. Weird. My husband's like that. He likes to fall asleep with the TV on. I can't stand that. And he acts like, well, I sleep better that way. And you probably think that you do. But the problem is that you're not sleeping as deeply as you should. So you might be able to fall asleep, but you're not sleeping as soundly or as deeply as you should. So maybe you can try a mask or something like that and then keep the lights on, but then put a mask on to maybe help. And, of course, if you're not suffering from insomnia, if it's working for you, then hey, more power to you. Terry says, my late husband was in the Navy. When he would deploy, I discovered that listening to audiobooks would help me fall back asleep. I also focus on rest and don't stress myself about falling asleep. That's so hard to do. It's like, don't stress about falling asleep. But then when you're not falling asleep, you're stressing about it because you're not falling asleep. It's again, that vicious cycle. It's like when you're trying to get pregnant, like don't stress about what day of your cycle it is, just, whatever, but you can't not stress about it when it's stressing you. But yes, if you can do anything to divert your attention from the anxiety and the thoughts, that are keeping you awake, that's why they say counting sheep. Why does counting sheep is the old, adage about why does that work? It's because it's like you're counting, you're focusing on some mundane, boring something, and you're not focusing on those thoughts that are keeping you awake. So that's all it is just focusing your attention on something, arbitrary and meaningless so that your brain can just drift off and go ahead and fall asleep. All right. Joni says, yes, I use the sound effect apps and they help. Allison says, I love this group and the live sessions. I wish I wasn't part of it. Don't we all? Yes. But though we might be hundreds of miles apart, I feel so connected, supported, and understood. Allison, that is so nice for you to say that. And that's really my goal, is for the between the lives and the Facebook group, and hopefully soon the community that I'm going to do, that's going to be really focused on some good topics. Like, we're going to really focus on a few good topics and really hone in on those things, kind of like we do with lives, but like on a more scheduled basis. I'm really kind of looking forward to that. So keep that in mind. Tony again says, "Oh Lord, not the wine." I've never been a wine drinker, and I'm kind of glad, because I'm afraid if I was, I'd be like, "Yep, I just have a couple glasses of wine and then drift off to la la land." So, Terry says, "My doctor told me to get into a routine, not skip breakfast, portion control on food, sleep early, get up early, a routine. Try it for 2 weeks. So far, so good." Nice. So Terry says she's trying some of the things we've talked about and what her doctor told her. Okay, so eating as soon as you get up, portion control on food. So, like, spreading your food out and then eating throughout the day, and then go to sleep early and get up early. Awesome. And she said it's working, and it's 2 weeks in. So awesome. So there is medical advice and a person right there that tells you that these things that she's trying, that is helping her and working. So I'm so glad to hear you. Thank you for that feedback to let us know that it's working for somebody. Joni says, my dog sleeps with me. Okay. I know that my sister Stormy, her dog sleeps with her too. And so she's so fat, she can't even jump up onto the bed. So she has to help her lift up onto the bed. And so, you know what, if that's what brings you comfort, then that's awesome. And security and safety. Like, if your dog's sleeping with you, you're not going to wake up scared that something's going to happen, somebody's coming in or whatever, because your dog is going to be there to protect you. All right. Let's see. Fritz Ann says, I use ocean waves and rain. Sometimes I sleep in my recliner. Yeah. And sometimes, like, sleeping in a different place, it's just because your body just kind of takes over, and if that's what helps you sometimes, and then, that's good too. Jonice says, I have a big pink body pillow. So it looks like, Jonice, you got everything kind of worked out. You got your whole bed and you got your dog and your pillow and your ocean waves, and like, now you just got to learn, you just got to keep that light off. Naomi says, I sleep with the last t-shirt that he wore hours before he passed. I keep it under his pillow. It does help. So that's, just something that's kind of like a comfort to you, that lets you feel that connection, so that you can go ahead and allow yourself to go ahead and drift off. So that's a good idea. Fritz Ann says, I journal before bed. It helps me get everything out of my brain. Yes, totally. So, yeah, my therapist says I'm going to have to start journaling too. I'm not looking forward to it though, but I use these videos as my form of journaling. So, like I said, I guess I do journal. It's just more like my journal comes in lists. Like I said, like, look at all these journal books. I don't have journal prompts. I just write whatever the hell is on my brain at the time, so that I can just stop, like, ruminating so much. But like I said, mine's not a grief thing. Mine's an ADD thing. So it's whatever. All right. This is the first time I have caught your live session. Yay. I try to do the same time. So Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. So far it's working. I don't know what's going to happen when I go back to work, because I'm only going to have Saturdays and Sundays off. And so I don't know if I'm going to want to do that on Saturdays at 4 o'clock, but we'll figure it out. Okay. We're going to figure out as we go. It's going to be fine. Right. Okay. So we've gone way past my hour. I try to keep it like kind of close to an hour, but I can get a little, chatty. So I hope that these things were something to help you. I know it's not going to be something you just try one day and it's just going to work. I know there's no magic pill. Just like there's no magic pill to feel better when we're grieving our loved one. All we can do is just try to do the best we can from a day-to-day basis. And some things we already know, but we need somebody else to tell us. Sometimes we already know and we need someone else to say, this worked for me. And sometimes we already know the answer in our brain. We just need somebody else to say, hey, this is what you need to be doing. So stop messing around, okay? And put the work in. Nobody's going to make you feel better. You have to make yourself feel better, right? Nobody's going to fix your problems. We got to do what's best for us. It's just like we know we're supposed to eat right, but we still don't do it all the time. So who's going to fix it for us? We are. So if it's to the point where it becomes a problem and it's affecting our health and it's affecting our day-to-day life, it's time to start focusing on, we can't fix everything at the same time. So let's focus on, if you're having this insomnia issue enough to where you're, going on the group and saying, hey, it's 3 o'clock and I am still not asleep. This is ridiculous. Okay, now it's time to focus on that area. If you can focus on that area and you can get some improvement in the sleep, then you're going to get some improvement on the other side, right? Helping to deal with your grief and your other issues. All right. We all know it's true. We just got to do it. We got to be big girls and boys, and we just got to do the grown up thing like that we tell our kids to do. All right. Okay. So thank you for being here for us. Thank you, and hugs to everyone. Thank you for providing. Thank you guys for showing up. I so appreciate all of you. I really enjoy having these live sessions, and so we're going to keep them going as long as we can. And if you have other issues, remember to join that group. All the links, important links, are down below in the discussion, in the description. The journal stuff, the grief pivot course, the Facebook group, all the links that you need, they're down below, so you can find those. All right. And you can always email me, onehappywidow@gmail.com, if you have questions. And until next time, get some sleep. Come back and report later and let me know if any of this is helping. And we'll see you guys next time. Sweet dreams. Good night. All right. See ya.